All right, today we're going to talk about teacher rights, and I know this excites you because you found out about what rights special education students have, you found out what rights that students have, you found out about religion, you found out about the code of ethics, and I always try to wait till the last class for y'all to find out about your rights because I don't even want any of y'all challenging me during the course. I want to wait till the last day when it's too late. See, so it's well-planned agenda, okay? All right, let's see, if I cut it on here. Personnel law, number one is that, it's the number one area of school litigation. In other words, we have more court cases involving personnel than anything else. That includes special education. There's more litigation with the area of personnel. It is hugely complicated. I know that you may not believe that, but there's a tremendous number of laws to enforce. So whoever your HR people are probably need to be commended for the things they have. The smaller the district, the fewer people you have, and so you got to be a journalist and know all the laws. When you're in a large district like Gwinnett, you may just have to concentrate on fringe benefits, and that's all you need to know because that's your only part of the job. But usually, if you think about in the school system, it is the principal that has the primary.
Could I have your attention, please?
It's generally, of course, you can have assistant principal that too, but bottom line, the buck stops with the principal. The principal manages the school, and I would imagine in the high schools in Gwinnett, you probably have over 200 employees. Because you probably got at least 120 teachers, and you got cafeteria staff, you've got bus drivers, you've got paraprofessionals, you've got support staff. I mean, just a tremendous amount of people. And honestly, administrators receive very little personnel training. And in fact, I don't even think there's a personnel course now that's offered in the colleges. I think they have one that's called school resources and something else that deals with finances and with human capital all in one course. And then you may have a school law course, but you may not have a good professor. So you know, that makes a difference as well.
Indeed.
And then in a business, you know, I love to hear people talk about, well, schools need to be run like a business. In a business that come that large, it would have one person dedicated solely to employment issues, and probably more than that for 250 employees. But yet we've got one person that deals with every aspect. I mean, not just personnel, but they deal with curriculum, they deal with transportation, food service. I mean, they do it all, and yet they expect it to be a personnel manager as well. All right, but I said it's hugely complicated. You got federal laws you have to know about. You got age discrimination in the Employment Act, 88. Now I'm going to ask a trick question. Does anybody know what the magic age is for being discriminated?
65.
65.
Yeah, 65.
65. Oh, you're a wimp. You just agree with everybody.
And she,
Katisha. I didn't know it was that difficult. Yes.
70.
70.
I was going to go with 70.
All right.
70.
50.
50.
Go young, go 40.
40.
Any age.
Any age. Well, for age discrimination, it has to be an age. You can discriminate for all kinds of things, but actually, I hate to tell you this, but your physics teacher is correct. Age 40 is, imagine if you're over 40, you can file an age discrimination complaint if you feel like you're discriminated. You would think of 60 or at least 50, but it's 40. Some of you are almost that age. Almost, see?
Almost, you're right. Not quite there.
All right. Then you have the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, 1964. American with Disabilities Act, we talked about that last week. Title IX, we talked briefly about that, I believe that was last week as well. And then you got the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
The Fair Labor Standards Act, including the Equal Pay Act. And all those are federal, and that doesn't include the Title I and some other stuff you need to know about. And then, not only you have the federal laws, you have the state laws. Employment Security Act, workers' compensation, sick leave, retirement. Some of them you want to know about retirement so that you can let them go ahead and retire early. Termination, and we don't know, is it the Fair Dismissal Act or what is it now? We don't really know. And then you've got this Georgia State Board of Education policies. They do all kinds of regulations, Department of Education puts out, and then you've got the Georgia Professional Standards with their 10 standards that you've got to know, and then you've got local board policies. So that's still probably everything. We're probably the most regulated agency there is, other than probably the nuclear industry. All right, a couple of Georgia laws maybe you need to know. Number one, evaluations, which are 20-2-210. And remember, all education laws start with the Title 20, and you can look up that, but it tells you about evaluations, and we'll go over that in a few minutes. You have contracts, 20-2-211. If you're in a charter school that's Wadham, they don't have to issue a contract. Now, they probably will because they want to keep some employees, but I wouldn't work with, well, I ain't working without a contract now. I work at the will of the PSC. Compensation, 20-2-212, and that really states where the, the minimum salary schedule. And if I'm a charter school, I don't even have to have a minimum salary schedule. I can pay you lower than that. You're not going to keep anybody that long, but that can be done. Suspension and transfer. Reprimands. All right, we have types of workers. Now, I'm not getting into the Alvin Wilbanks workers where you have those who teach and those who, that assist or support teachers. And it's not quite like Paul Shell says that you have two types of workers. You have good ones and bad ones. You need to get rid of the bad ones. But we have, first of all, oops, let me back up. We have classified employees. They're bus drivers, food service, paraprofessionals, custodians, clerical, and they are all overtime eligible. Now, when I say overtime eligible, does somebody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not supposed to work but what?
40 hours.
40 hours a week. Now, I don't know the law as well as some people do, but there are situations where Keisha could work 45 hours one week and then 35 another week or within a certain time frame, and I can avoid paying her time and a half. But the general rule for people like me that don't know specific every level of law, because I don't work with that every day, is that if you work over 40 hours, you're supposed to be compensated at time and a half. Then we have your certified employees. Now, I know parapros have a license, but they're still, by law, considered classified. The certified employees are your teachers and your administrators. And along with that, your librarians, your guidance counselors, or we would consider them certified employees as well. And then you have your non-employees. You have your independent contractors, you have volunteers, and you have trainees. Now, the trainees, for the most part, are student teachers, for example, but most of them now with the law, they have a certificate as well because they have a pre-service certificate. Now, can somebody give me an idea of what an independent contract is? Who would you use there?
Somebody from the outside, I think our speech teachers are independent contractors.
That could be it. There are several teachers that are certified in speech therapy, and they are contract employees. They're not employed by the school district. Others are employed by the school system because they want the retirement benefits and things of that sort. You're right. But how about now, y'all have some in-house attorneys because you're large enough, but many school districts will use Harvard and Hartley or, and Hawkins, and there's other law firms as well that school districts use, and they use them from time to time. That would be an outside or non-employee independent contractor. How about architect? Which you have to have an architect when you build something and it's over X amount of money, so that would be an independent contractor. Some school districts have, they contract out the cleaning service. Some contract out food service. There are some school systems, I don't think any in Georgia, but they contract out the transportation services and let an independent company do that. So there's all kinds of independent contractors that school systems use. But it could be lawn care. So you just have to know about that. All right. Now let's talk about certified employees a minute. Tenure was abolished on July 1 of 2000. Did you know that?
Yep.
And I moved to Georgia August 14th, 2000. So I knew what the scuttlebutt or what the talk was in the neighborhood because people were mad. Who abolished the tenure? Anybody remember? I'll give you a hint, he's a governor. Roy Barnes. Very good. I'm glad somebody could remember that. And if you remember, he served one term. And why? All the teachers got out and voted against him the second time. And when Sonny Perdue walked in, one of the first things he did was reinstate tenure for teachers.
Sunny money.
Sunny money.
He gave you some Sonny money. That's about $100 each, didn't he? He was buying your vote.
Yeah.
So it was reinstated in 2003. Teachers receive tenure if they receive and accept a fourth school year in a single school system. And let's pick on Rebecca a minute since nobody can see her. But Rebecca, how many years experience you have teaching now?
8.
You do have 8? You started at 12? Okay, all right. Okay. Well, anyhow, I was going to use, let's say that Rebecca is in her 3rd year of teaching this year in Gwinnett, okay? And, let's say about Christmas time, her boyfriend proposes to her, and they plan to get married in June. Okay, after school, he wants her to finish school. But he actually lives in Glenn County. You know, he likes the ocean, so he works at St. Simon's. And so naturally, when she gets married in June, she's going to move and live with her husband. And so when she gets that contract offered to her in April or May, whenever they send it out, she just writes on it, I do not accept this contract, I'm getting married, and I'm moving away from here. That was a big mistake because she didn't get tenure. You have to be issued that 4th contract and sign it. Then when you give it, then the next week you write a letter and say, I'm getting married, and so I'm going to have to, I'm requesting to be released from my contract. Because here's what happened, because you give that letter of resignation, when you go to Glenn County, you got to start all over again and teach another 4 years to get that due process. So remember that you are eligible for what we call tenure or due process in Georgia once you get that 4th contract in the same school system. Now, if you've got that tenure, let's say you had finished 4 years and you got married and was leaving to go to Glenn County the 5th year, for 1 year when you go to Glenn, you don't have tenure or due process because you're changing districts. But once they give you a 2nd contract, your tenure has been reinstated. So it took you, 5 years. So people need to know that because it could cost you 7 years before you get that, okay? And like I said, previously tenured teachers achieve tenure after the 2nd year, and that includes teachers from out of state. If they're coming in and they're tenured somewhere else, they teach 1 year, they're good. That's why sometimes it's okay to roll the dice and hire a teacher from out of state, even if you have questions, because you can get rid of them after a year. All right. Now, the Fair Employment Dismissal, or really it's called FDA here in Georgia. It's the Fair Dismissal Act, okay? And here's the things. Here are the grounds for terminating or suspending an educator's contract. Number 1, somewhere, incompetency. Now, I like to tell people, I think that's a little harder to prove than maybe some people think. But a lot of people say, no, it's pretty easy to show when somebody's incompetent. But let me just kind of give you my argument. All right, Keisha, we'll pick on you since you had to come from another state, right? Let me ask you something. Did you have to earn a college degree from an accredited institution?
Yes.
So you must be fairly competent if you were able to pass the rigors of college work and have at least a 2.0, right? Mm-hmm. Did you have to pass a national test or Georgia test on a subject area in order to get your license in Georgia? Praxis, right? In elementary, right? So you must be competent. You passed that test as well. So I would maintain if somebody can pass and do the rigors of college, if they can pass the test, then they must be fairly competent. Now, some people, I have to admit, have proven me wrong. But I would still say it's a little harder to do. But naturally, if you've got people that can't write a complete sentence and send in, you know, letters home to parents, or probably more than that, it might not be the intellectual, but it may be that you can't maintain discipline. That might be the incompetency. You don't have classroom control or something like that sort. But incompetency is one. Number two, insubordination. Insubordination is when you've been given a directive, a legal directive, and you, for some reason, have refused to do it. There's a difference between forgetting and refusing to do it. Okay? For example, if I were to tell Jonah, we require teachers to turn in their lesson plans every Monday morning at 8 o'clock. I want them in by 8 o'clock on Monday mornings. Jonah doesn't turn them in on a Monday. Well, as a person, I'll probably write a letter and say, Jonah, I noticed that you did not turn in your lesson plans as directed on 8 o'clock on Monday. Happens the second time, I might just say, this is the second time that you've not turned it in, and I've given you a directive that you will turn them in. Should it happen again, it may lead to your termination. So I've already put it on notice, and if she does that a third time, then I certainly feel very comfortable that we could go to any hearing, and I gave her a legal directive, and she refused it. Now, at the same time, picking back at Kekeisha, because of her not being from Georgia Richmond and all the laws, and I say, you know, Kekeisha, every Friday afternoon before you go home, I want you to wash my car, because I like to have my car real clean when I get home. I can take my spouse out to eat on Friday night, and you know, and maybe I'm traveling on Saturday and I want a clean car. And I don't you dare leave school until you wash my car. All right? She flips me off and leaves the school grounds.
Yep.
Can I fire her? Insubordination?
No.
Absolutely not, because that was not a legal directive. I can't make her wash my car. I might say to her, wash my car and you get first period planning, and she may be happy to do that, I don't know. But bottom line, it has to be a legal directive for it being insubordinate, okay? Willful neglect of duty. That could be also lesson plans. It could be leaving your class and not teaching, because you've been told that at some point in time, students got to be supervised, right? Or it could be that you're not showing up for cafeteria duty, recess duty, hall duty, that type of thing. Immorality. Now, is that an easy or hard one to prove?
I think hard.
You think what?
Hard.
Yeah, I would say it's challenging.
Yeah, it's open to interpretation. I think it hard too.
Ooh, this is a good class. Everybody got to get the right answer. It really is, because think about it a minute. Do you know some people that think it's wrong to have an adult beverage? Yeah, right? There are people who believe that. Do you think there are also people who believe that it's immoral to divorce? Yeah, I would say that as well. Do you think there are also people that think it's immoral if you don't go to church on Sunday? So morality is really in the eyes of the beholder. And you're right, it's due to interpretation. Now, there are probably some places that are more conservative than others, and probably some things you could get away with in a large place like Gwinnett, you probably couldn't get away from in a smaller place like Beaufort. So that is one of those. Now, I can tell you this though, I'm pretty sure if you have sex with a student, that will be judged as immoral, and you will lose your license for that.
Back in South Carolina, it was a small school district, but this one teacher, she was pregnant and she wasn't married, and so they moved her to another school because they didn't want the kids to kind of put that together. And I thought that was, wow.
That took a little courage, but legally you can transfer people as long as it's not done as retaliation. And truly, back when, in the old days, if you were a teacher, single female teacher, and you were pregnant, you lost your job. Yet the coach that got you pregnant kept his job. I mean, really, that's how bad it was back then. I mean, really, but that's how it was discriminated. We discriminated against women, but it was okay. The coach could follow 5 or 6 kids and 4 or 5 different teachers, and they got to keep their job. But it's different now, Kekeisha. It is different now, and they would be hard pressed to terminate somebody. Simply that in a private school, they probably could, because they have a little different guidelines to follow. All right. inciting, encouraging, or counseling students to violate any valid state law, municipal ordinance, rule, or policy. Do you remember, I believe it was last year, when students were kind of encouraged to have a walkout demonstration in support of the school in Florida? What was the name of it?
Parkland.
The Parkland. And I think Fulton County acknowledged the fact that, okay, students will let you do that. Gwinnett said no, which they both had the right to make the decision. If Chris had told his students, I can't believe that you're not supporting Parkland, and I can't believe that you don't think enough of a student's high school life that you go sit here passively and remain in class when everybody else knows that they're staging walkouts all over the nation. Well, if those group of students get up and walk out, guess who can be terminated? Chris, because he is encouraging them to break a rule or policy of the Board of Education. Or if you've got a teacher that's mad because the coach was fired and encourages a walkout or a demonstration in the cafeteria, you can be fired for that. So you have to be very careful about what you're supporting and what you're not. Okay, I'm going to go back one at a time to immorality. I think I've talked about this with the Code of Ethics. But quite frankly, you know, you probably could get a job at the Pink Pony, I don't know, what's the name of the dancing place? Yeah, at least it shows I don't know, but I mean, there are...
He had it right to start with, though. I'm just kidding.
There are certain establishments that, I mean, you know, that cater to, how shall I say it, not topless dancing, but pretty close to that. And there's nothing that would prevent a teacher from getting a job of that, because that is a legal job. And I would say that if I were being fired because of that, I would certainly want to challenge that in court. Now, again, if you show there's a big uproar in the community about it, then you might be able to say, I cannot put her as a teacher because parents don't want their children in her class. Well, maybe you say, well, move it to the district office. Let me work there, let me push a pencil and do some things. So, you know, it really depends on the circumstance of the case. We've had situations where a person has been in the pornography business with films and then later gone into teaching. So, I mean, you just have to understand. All right, now, reduction of staff due to loss of students and cancellation of programs. We talked about that today because Floyd County had to go through that. A lot of school systems had to do it, and we'll talk about reduction in force, I think, a little bit later on. If we finish and I have it, I want to go back and talk about reduction in force in the future. So that is a very valid reason where you can eliminate teachers, and it can be tenured teachers as well. But you've got to have some type of policy or procedure that you're following. I just can't say, oh, I've got to eliminate 10 teachers, so it's going to be Megan, and it's going to be Chris, and it's going to be Wayne. Now, I just can't do it that way. I've got to have some type of rhyme or reason why, but I don't have to follow last one hired, first one fired if I have a policy. Okay? And Floyd County did a little bit of that because they said if you've got a less than average evaluation, we're going to let you go first. We're going to keep the ones that have a good evaluation. Okay? Failure to secure and maintain necessary educational training. You know, every 5 years, you used to have to get your certificate renewed with 6 hours, or you had to have, what, 10 PLUs. Now, with the new law, you just got to do, you've got some goals that have been established for you. What is it, professional growth goals? And you just have to meet those to get your certificate renewed. But if you chose not to do that, we don't have to employ you the next year. If your certificate's run out and it's expired and you didn't do it, not required to. Now, as a school, you can request an extension of a year and probably get it, but the superintendent has to request it. And why in the world would I request it if somebody wanted to get rid of anyhow?
Yeah, no, that's right.
All right. And then any other good and sufficient cause. You can tell attorneys wrote this because they got to have one phrase in there about any other good and sufficient cause. And really, you'll see in most letters of termination that they'll also include any other good and sufficient cause when they're outlining why you're being terminated. In fact, with your court case with Gordon, when they talked about that letter, they didn't outline why she was being terminated. You know, they didn't give her a specific reason either, I don't believe. And it didn't meet the 10 days either. So, employment, termination, suspension, administrative leave. Usually an educator is placed on administrative leave until the investigation is completed. For example, I'll pick on Jonah again. Let's say that Jonah slapped a child in her classroom and then kicked him and cracked a rib. Well, when I asked Jonah about it, she said, "Oh, I didn't do that. The child fell from his desk and cracked his rib, and that's what happened." Well, I will have to investigate, which means I got to talk to little Johnny and ask what happened to him. If Johnny's in the hospital, it may take me a couple days to get up to the hospital, so I'm going to put you on administrative leave rather than just putting you leave without pay and trying to terminate you. Because when I do that, we have how many days before you have to have the hearing? 10 days. And that clock's, as soon as I'll tell her not to come back and I'm suspending her, that clock starts ticking. But if I put her on administrative leave, then I'm not suspending her. I'm just asking her to stay home for a couple of days, let me investigate. Once I investigate, and I've got 8 kids that tell me that she did kick Johnny and she did break his jaw or whatever else in the ribs and maybe one of these kids at that 6th grade, they might have a phone and maybe I find a video of it. At that time I could call her and say, "Jonah, I've now completed my investigation. We're going to recommend termination. You'll be getting a letter of termination outlining your rights and when the hearing's going to be." Okay. Superintendent has the ability to suspend a teacher for 10 days pending a termination hearing, and when you are suspended or when you're on administrative, you are getting paid, because in America you're innocent until what? Proven guilty. Exactly. Now, on that for 10 days, I don't have to wait for a board hearing to suspend up to 10 days. For example, if I were to walk into class to observe and Patrick is laying on the floor just knee walking drunk and has liquor bottles all around him and he just can't even get up to teach class, I could then suspend him to 10 days right then. Here, I don't have to wait and go call the board and do that. Or if Wayne was charged with molesting a child. Or let's do it the other way. We're always blaming the guys. If Rebecca was charged with molesting one of her male students, then I could send her home for 10 days. I probably would do one administratively to give me a little time to investigate. But bottom line, if I knew it happened, I could suspend her up to 10 days pending the hearing. Okay, and like I said, the reason the administrative leave is the clock is ticking. Once teacher suspended, you must meet the 10-day requirement. And here's the thing I want you to know right now. The Board of Education is the only entity that can hire and fire. We hear all the time that the principal has fired a teacher, or that the superintendent has fired a teacher, or the principal has hired a teacher. That is a bold-faced lie. They don't have the authority. The only entity in Georgia is the school board. As a superintendent, I can recommend employment. I can recommend termination, but that board has to vote, so they are the ones that officially do it. I can recommend Chris, but the board doesn't approve it. He doesn't have a job. So that's why I'm saying it's always the Board of Education that does that. I used to have a principal that would tell a person, "Well, why do you want to work for me? I'm going to hire you." And I used to say, "You can't do that. You don't have the authority to hire," but he thought he did. Anyhow, requirements of process. All right. Notice, if I'm going to try to fire a teacher, terminate a teacher, I've got to give written notice of the charges, and it should be given at least 10 business days before the hearing. I can't just go to Mike and say, "Mike, here's the letter, I'm firing you tomorrow, and oh, by the way, it's going to be held at one of the high schools. You got to figure out which one." I mean, look how many high schools there are in Gwinnett. He'd run himself ragged trying to find out which one. So when you do that, you have to give him a charge. I got to let Mike know why he's being terminated. Got to give him a reason. Remember, we went over, I think, the 11 reasons. It can be more than one. But I would try to just do the harshest ones, because the more things you have, the more you got to prove. Must include the causes of the suspension or termination, name of known witnesses, and a concise summary of the evidence to be used. I'm going to use Patrick, because Patrick was the assistant principal. He walked with me to your classroom and saw you passed out. Well, I guess Patrick passed out with him. Anyhow, then they're going to say that we're going to testify that you were passed out. We could smell the liquor with a half bottle still full.
at the desk.
And we also have to tell him the time, the place they're going to be, so that he knows about that. And there has to be at least 10 business days, because he may have to have time to get him an attorney and to, plan their strategy. And actually, that Mike can also, at this hearing, subpoena witnesses to come and talk on his behalf. And it never fails. You have a sorry teacher that you're trying to fire, they're going to bring 4 or 5 of their former students to talk about, oh, I love Miss Jones, and she was just my favorite teacher, and she was good to me. And then they'll bring in 2 other grade level teachers that talk about how great Miss Jones is. I always want to ask them, how do you know Miss Jones is great? When have you observed her? When have you left your class to observe her? But anyhow.
Just that
And
half
I leave
hour.
that class.
And now the teacher can request extension past 10 days was unpaid. In other words, you can't have to like Akeisha saying, well, if I'm gonna get paid, I'll just ask for a hearing 30 days from now, 40 days from now.
Next
I'll just have you, next year. I'll just give you some money. No, you can only be paid up to 10 days, but you can't ask for extension. It may be that the attorney needs more time to prepare. It may be that this happens before spring break, and you've got some of your star witnesses that are going to be going on spring break on a cruise and not going to come back to the hearing. So that's why you might want to ask for additional days. Okay, what must be contained in the charge order? We talked about it just a minute ago. Really, it has to include the cause or the causes of the suspension or termination. I am suspending you because you have an inappropriate relationship with the student. I'm suspending you because when I came to your class, I could smell alcohol in your breath. You had your eyes were dilated. You were stuttering, and so you were under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Okay, so and then, of course, I'm gonna have to list any witnesses and a summary. Yes, sir.
So, we had a teacher that used to work with us, and that kind of thing happened, but he wasn't terminated. Is that the board's discretion because he went through like a program?
Yeah.
They have to let him go through a program and see the outcome of that
Well,
before they...
don't dig yourself too deep. Here's the thing. Yes, the school district can decide, well, Mike's a good teacher, he also coaches, he's a physics teacher, we can't find another one, and we want you to go and get rehabilitated, we're gonna let you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, we're gonna let you do this. But the bottom line, that district we want to say, but they still are or should turn your name into the Professional Standards Commission because you violated a code of ethics. Now, I'm sure there's some schools out there that are doing exactly what you said about they go forgive they're not going to report it to the PSC, but if we find out about it, then we're going to go out to HR or principal or somebody for not doing it. So legally, yes, they can keep your job. In fact, even if we suspend a year, they could hold your job for a year. But I mean, yes, school districts can provide rehabilitation for you. Good question.
Okay.
Time and place we're here to be held, as I mentioned. Right for the teacher have legal counsel because they have a right to an attorney, and they can subpoena their own witnesses. And like I said, we can go past the 10 days. All right. All notices shall be served personally by certified mail or statutory overnight delivery. Now, I know that y'all don't think that Keisha is real cunning, but she's pretty slick. She's not worried about being fired because she knows we will send that letter by certified mail. And first of all, she's moved. She moved about 3 weeks ago and hadn't told the school district what her new address is. So it's not gonna get it. Bottom line is this, that is her responsibility. If she moves and doesn't tell the district, if we send it to the address we have on record, that suits as meeting the guidelines of the law. Now, I will say this, Paul Shaw normally, when I was superintendent, as a principal, we were working, I would go to the room with the teacher about 2:30, or maybe call her into the office right at the end of the school, so I need to talk to you a minute, and I'd hand deliver the letter, and I'd have a witness there to do it so that, I was sure to get it. Some schools get the school resource officer to do it. Some schools just send it certified. So, I mean, but the bottom line is I've got to get it to you some way. You've got to receive that. Service shall be deemed perfected when sent to the last known address of the educator and with sufficient postage. Now, along those same lines there, if it's pretty close to, you're supposed to issue contracts by May 15th, and Kakisha's worried about not being renewed, so she's out the 13th, 14th, and 15th. If I can't find her, I'm gonna go to her house and serve it. I mean, I'm not gonna miss the guy. And if she's gone, I can leave it there for her, and I've met my duty. Yes,
Is there a
ma'am.
difference between terminating and not renewing the
Yes.
contract?
Termination is normally during the school year. Non-renewal is at the end of the school
Do you still
year.
have to have one of those causes for non-renewal?
Yes. Well, if you have due process rights. If you haven't had that fourth contract yet, then all I gotta do is say, Megan, I really appreciate your work the past 3 years. Your service is no longer needed. And that's it. All right. Council shall be entitled to counsel, subpoenas shall be issued, in the name of the Board of Education shall be signed by the chairperson or vice chairperson, not the superintendent. Now, would a judge throw out the case if it was signed by the superintendent instead? I don't know. They sure threw out one because they didn't have the charge load in the 10 days, so I would make sure that I'm following the letter of the law. At the hearing. Now, Gwinnett probably has a hearing officer or a tribunal that does it. There's no way the board could hear every termination hearing, because even if every school had one, that'd be over 100 years that to have. Or if every, I don't know, high school attendance zone had two. How many attendance zones y'all have for high school? How many high schools you have? 12, 14?
I know we got 80
Yeah.
elementary.
Yeah. So I mean, it'd be almost impossible. So most of the large school districts, CAB, they will have a designated group to hear it that have been trained. It's the district's case. It's the district's job to prove that the teacher should be suspended or terminated. Then you have the teacher's case. In other words, after the district presents their side, the teacher presents their side. I would personally want to call the teacher as a witness, as an adversary witness, the first thing. Why? Why would I want the teacher to call up on the stand beforehand as the first one? Anybody have any idea?
They want to change their story?
Exactly. I don't want Chris sitting in that audience and listening to everything that the witnesses have to say, and then kind of maybe working to change the story. I have responsibility. I want him to get up and tell his side of the story, and then when I bring the witness up, they may refute some of what he said to make him look bad. So that's why I would always want to get the teacher up there first, let him or her give the side of the story, and then we bring in witnesses that would say that's not true. He did slap Johnny. He didn't just touch him at the shoulder and say, Johnny, get up from the seat.
He dragged
The board decides, or the tribunal, and teachers can appeal to the state board, just like Day did. When she didn't like the decision of the local board, she appealed to the State Board of Education. The local board didn't like the state board's decision. They appealed it to the circuit court in Floyd County. They didn't like that. They appealed it to the Court of Appeals. When they made that decision and it wasn't in effect, she appealed to the Supreme Court of Georgia, but they refused to hear it. And that's why it stood there. All right. Hearing shall be conducted before the local board, or the local board may designate a tribunal to consist of not less than 3 or more than 5 impartial persons possessing academic expertise to conduct the hearing and submit its findings and recommendations to the local board for its decision thereon. Again, you want to train some people. It could be a banker, it could be a retired teacher, it could be a current teacher in the school, or an administrator. It can be all kinds of people. It can be another attorney. But the bottom line is when they listen, they're going to take record. I mean, there's going to be official minutes of that, whether it be a court stenographer, whether it be a video recording of the entire process or whatever, because when that tribunal makes its decision, the board, if it's appealed, the board should listen to the audio or the video or read the minutes and then make a decision, because who officially can fire?
The board.
The board can either accept the recommendation of the tribunal or they can reject it. Okay? The board has the final authority. Hearing shall be at local board expense. If matters heard by tribunal, the original and 2 copies shall be filed in the office of the superintendent. You do have to, just like a court of law, you have to take the oath of affirmation. Bless you. And all questions relating to the admissibility of evidence or other legal matters shall be decided by chairperson or presiding officers with the right to appeal full board or tribunal members. I always advise boards and superintendents that if you go have a hearing, you get an attorney to sit with the board and give them legal advice, and you have an attorney to help you preside over the case. The first time that I ever did no, it wasn't the first time. It was the first time I was in a district. I was an area superintendent. We had a strange setup. We actually had a local county board of education superintendent. He was elected, and we had a county board. But then we had 4 area boards in the county, and each of the area boards hired a superintendent.
Wow.
The elected superintendent handled the money and facilities. We handled curriculum and personnel. First lesson I learned, he who controls the money controls the district. Because if they didn't give you any money to hire a teacher, you can't hire it, right? But bottom line is that what happened that day, I went to the hearing, and it was with the county board, and the attorney that had talked to me a little bit about the case marched up and sat with the board, left me all alone to defend against the person I was making, I was trying to terminate. And I never once did he say, now Paul, you realize once the thing, I'm the board attorney, I got to go sit up there. I thought he was going to be with me. And I promise you, I never used that attorney when I became a superintendent. And made a decision. Even when I interviewed with the board, I'd say, let me ask you, who is your board attorney? If they named that person, I would say to them, well, if you select me a job, do I have the right to change? If they say, oh no, he's the board chairman's first cousin, I say, well, I don't need to work here. And that's true. I mean, I was not going to work anywhere without that, because I didn't think he was well prepared either way. Anyhow, that's my own story. And you must use the same rules governing non-jury trials in the Superior Court. Decisions and appeals, the local board shall render its decision at the hearing or within 5 days afterwards. You don't have to make a decision that night. In one of the hearings that I was involved in when we were terminating the principal, it went on for about 3 days to 2 o'clock in the morning. And let me tell you, you don't make good decisions at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing wrong with taking a couple of days off to reflect, then reconvening and meeting. So you do have up 5 days. You can make a decision, as soon as the hearing's over, but you have 5 days
Is that
in which to
5
make a
business
decision.
days, or
Huh?
is that 5 business days?
No, it's 5 days. If the hearing is with the tribunal, then the local board has 10 days. And the reason for that, they have all that reading to do. And so that's why they give 10 days. And then appeals, like I said, can go straight to the state board. All right, and we talked about power to relieve with the charges of such seriousness or other circumstances exist which indicate the educator cannot be permitted to continue to perform his or her duties without danger or disruption, then we can suspend them. Like I said, I don't need board permission to suspend up to 10 days. But if I'm going to terminate you, I've got to go to the board. Or I shouldn't say me, because I'm not a superintendent anymore. But it could be like if you're a danger to children because maybe you molested one of the children, or you physically beaten one of the children, something of that sort. Or if everybody knows you were knee walking drunk and laying on the floor, then you probably just don't need to show up again, because kids think it's all right to come to school under the influence. All right, I'm going to kind of take this from an administrative viewpoint and kind of give some tips on how you should prepare if you're trying to terminate a teacher. But at the same time, understand if you're a teacher and you're getting ready to be terminated, you can use some of these same tips to know how to prepare and defend yourself, okay? All right, number one, can you cite a law, a rule, a regulation, or a policy that's been violated? That's the first thing you want to be able to do, is tell somebody why you're terminating. You just can't say because I don't like it. You have to say that you're violating the school rule of turning in your lesson plans every Monday morning. You failed to do it the last 9 weeks, even though I've reminded you and sent letters to you. Not only have you failed to do that, but now you've been insubordinate. So in other words, I'm able to cite a reason of why I'm recommending a termination. Second, I would tell you, now attorneys are different. They may want to just do the shotgun approach and have 6 or 7 things because she's incompetent, she's immoral, and she's insubordinate, and any other good and sufficient cause. I tell you, concentrate on what's the worst thing and just deal with that, because it's a lot easier to prove one thing sometimes than to prove 4 or 5, because once they put a question or a doubt in somebody's mind on one thing, then they may say, well, maybe it's that was the second thing. You want to have it pretty clear cut. You want to have it where there's no doubt that this person should be terminated. I would give this document to a couple other people, not in the same school, of course. I may want to, if I'm in White County, I may want to go to Gwinnett and give it to a couple of principals or teachers and say, hey, if this happened, would you think this teacher could be fired? Let them look at it, kind of give you some input. Now, if they would come to the same conclusion, then you're good. Now, I'm not at the same thing. Now, you got to tell the attorney, you got to get the attorney too, and let them look at it and say, do I have enough evidence, do you believe, for us to win this case? If they say no, I don't think you do, then I'm going to ask, what else do you need? And I have told an attorney before, I don't care, we're going to roll the dice, we're going to go to court, if we lose, we lose, but at least people know that I'm trying to get rid of this person, and at least maybe I'll have saved face with some people that think this teacher's awful as well. And we have done that before.
Did it work?
Yeah. We won. You doubt me?
No. I'm just curious if you're going to tell us a juicy story.
The bottom line is seriously, I've tried, well, let me tell you this now. You really don't even want to go to court.
Right.
What you want to do is convince the person to resign, but you have to be careful what you do. What I would just say is, I'd have several conversations with gentlemen. I'd say, gentlemen, we've had conversations, I've written several letters, here's all my documentation, I've got the video. My advice to you is you probably need to resign rather than go to court. However, you have that right to go to court and have your day in court and give your side the testimony. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to resign right now, effective the end of the year or effective immediately, whenever it's going to be. If you choose not to do that, then I'm going to make that recommendation for your termination.
Can I resign and then take you to court? Like if I feel like if I resigned and I felt pressure to resign?
Yeah, and that's why you have to be real careful that you're not pressured to resign. I'm just saying, in fact, what I would normally say, probably instead of saying, I really don't have any choice but to recommend your termination. And if you would say, well, do you have other alternatives? So I'm not aware of any other alternatives unless maybe you want to resign, and that's kind of as an afterthought. And that way I'm not pressuring you, but you could claim you were pressured. Yeah.
If she resigns, are you required to still report her to the PSC, or is that like a negotiated kind of?
If she's violated the code of ethics, I'm required to. In fact, I would tell her, even if she resigns, say, well, I'm gonna still be required to turn you into the PSC because you cheated on the standardized test, and I'm authorized. I'm required by law to do that. There have been districts that haven't. In fact, we got one district right now that we're looking at taking somebody's license because they have they've known of violations and not reported it.
The teacher or
Or
the
district.
District.
The district. Wow.
You got to tell us about that after class.
We won't tell anybody. Your secret's safe.
All right, and the other thing you want to say, are proper procedures followed? Did you give the 10-day notice? Did you give a charge letter? Did you give them an opportunity to have an attorney represent them? Examples of documentation, personal notes, parent complaints, student complaints. When I was a principal, any student or any parent that came to me and complained about Mr. Norton, I would, just jot down that little Johnny came on September the 15th and complained about Mr. Norton. And Johnny could be a troublemaker, and it may not mean anything to me, but I'm going to still record it because you never know when you need additional information. And if a parent called and complained about how rude he was to her in a conference, or that he didn't treat her little bitty Bob politely and passing, I'm going to still make that notation. Just keep the notes. I'm going to send out any info. I'm going to keep general information I send. If I've sent Jonah a letter saying I want the lesson plan turned in Monday mornings by 8 o'clock, then I'm going to have that in there. Or if I've assigned her duty next to the girls' restroom at before school, and then I find her. any notes I've sent to the teachers. And I try to tell principals all the time, please be careful what you're doing, because you don't want to send all these letters talking about Patrick, how wonderful a teacher he is, and how great he did that day. There's nothing wrong with a compliment, but just make sure you're not complimenting every day, because there may be a day when something doesn't go right, and then somebody's going to say, look, he's got 22 letters saying that he's a wonderful teacher, and he's trying to fire. So you have to balance that. There's nothing wrong with telling somebody they're doing a good job. And each instance really stands on, each year stands as own, but it's much more difficult for me as a principal to fire him in his 5th year of us working together than in the 1st year. And somebody liable will ask, well, why was he good enough for 4 years? And then maybe I can just say, well, I was building documentation and watching the first couple of years I was learning. I've got to come up with an answer for that. Examples of student work. I'm going to collect that, because if Jonah's giving A's to people in English class, and she's giving A's for their essay, and they've got run together sentences and misspelled words, and then look at Patrick's, and he's giving somebody a C and have less mistakes, and I'm going to wonder about her ability to grade and recognize. So you do want to look at student work, because you want to make sure that they have high standards and that they're not giving false answers and marking things wrong that are right. And by the way, as a principal, you can walk around and look and see what the students are doing in the classroom too. Get your cell phone out and take a picture of it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You want to look at teacher original material. Like I said, if you got somebody that says that Magellan was from Canada and that he discovered South America, then I think you might want to question their competence at that point in time, their knowledge of subject matter. Any kind of conference notes, I always sent a letter to the teacher after I met with him, whether it's good or bad, because I wanted to make sure that they heard what I said and that we were all on the same page. And I'd always follow up and say, Patrick and I meeting on September the 25th, 2019, we talked about your lack of ability to control the students in your classroom, that 4 students got up and went to the sharpened their pencils in the middle of your lecture, 2 were sleeping, 2 walked outside and went to a restroom without, that's pretty good documentation there that I have. So you want to follow up with the notes. You want to look at prior evaluations. Now, if they're all superior, might be a little more difficult. You might want to wait 1 more year and give him, a poor evaluation this year and then a poor the next year. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it depends on who did the evaluation and how it was done. Or it could be, in all sincerity, it could be the Patrick's a great teacher, but he went through a divorce, and that caused him to start drinking and hitting the drugs, and he just was never prepared for class. It could be that was the problem. The superior teacher's got personal problems in his life, in life now that prohibits him from doing a good job. And then always I tried to keep up with things like how many absences the teacher had, how many disciplinary referrals, and don't think that, well, I have trouble with classroom management, but I don't want the principal to know, so I'm not going to send anybody. Well, that also would I'd make a note that I walked by his class, they were swinging from the rafters, and he didn't send anybody to me, So it can work both ways. But I did get concerned when a teacher was sending me 10 and 12 students every day. You know how it is. Some teachers send you kids and you say, oh my God, not again. And another teacher send you kids, you say, my God, I probably need to put this one in jail because she never sent me. I mean, really. So you have to take that into account. But bottom line, if I were to meet with Keisha and say to her, I noticed you missed 50 days this year. However, I noticed that 45 of them were excused because you were on maternity leave, and we certainly understand that, but I just want to let you know that you were above the average. Somebody else might want to say, Chris, you missed 20 days this year. Our average for the school was 8. I noticed that it was about every other Friday that you had to miss. Some reason why Fridays are magic. I mean, at least I would address it with them on that.
Germs all week.
Yeah. I need a long weekend to prepare my lessons. Come on. And then, bottom line is you've got to provide assistance. As an administrator, my job is to help teachers be successful. Teachers' job is to help kids be successful. And we want to be successful with everybody. And Megan, being that you're at a private public school, are you successful with all of your students? No. And so as a superintendent, I'm probably not successful with all of my teachers, but I want to be. I don't want to go to a doctor that says, well, you know, I'm not going to care for you because I can lose 10% of my patients and no big deal, that's expected. You want everybody to be successful, and you want to work with that teacher to help them be successful. You want to help them provide assistance, tell them what they're doing wrong. You've got some teachers that just aren't going to work hard enough to be an outstanding teacher, because this hard work is a lot of preparation, and you know, nowadays you're supposed to individualize and all this other stuff, and you know, come up with different tests and all that, and it is hard, and some teachers may not be willing to do that. Others may not be able to handle the kids discipline-wise, but bottom line, you've got to at least show that you're attempting to help that person be successful. And in fact, what I would tell you, once we give somebody a contract, we're obligated to help them be successful. But like anything else, you don't have to go to the last mile with them. If it becomes obvious to you that they don't care, why should you keep them? I honestly will tell you, I think that's one thing that we don't do. We don't have high enough expectations for our teachers. And students, most of the time, will, you know, they'll rise to the level of our expectations. Most of them, yes, no.
So just a scenario that I just
Okay.
made up.
Good.
What if you're a hardworking teacher?
If you're what kind of teacher?
Hardworking teacher.
Hardworking, okay.
And you don't get the support from your assistant principal or principal because they just don't like you.
Well, a couple of things there. I will certainly be the first to admit that we have some principals and systems that don't support the teachers like they should. There are some schools that really have a lot of discipline problems. However, on the other hand, I can also tell you, if you're that good of a teacher, that you're that hard-working teacher, you shouldn't have any trouble finding a job somewhere else. So it works both ways. But if I were a teacher and I felt like I wasn't getting support, I'd start looking, because you can't trust them anyhow. That's my. But you might say, well, I like the school, I've been here 8 or 10 years. Well, you got to make some decisions on whether you want to roll the dice or not. But bottom line, administrators should help you. Sometimes teachers won't, you know, almost teach the class for them, and we can't have that either. But bottom line is, we do have a lot of administrators. I like to say, we don't have a teacher problem in Georgia. We have a leadership problem, and we need principals that do a better job of working and guiding teachers. All right, preparation. You want to organize the documents and evidence. I mean, you want to get real organized, because you're going to be in front of a board, or you're going to be in front of a tribunal, you're going to be in front of people, and so you want to be organized. If you give the impression that you don't know what you're talking about and you're disorganized, that's not going to help you win the case. Number two, you want to check for any errors. If I've written Jonah letters and I have misspelled words, how in the world am I going to fire her if I haven't misspelled what I got? You know? So you better look. If you got it, you might say, well, maybe I better wait another year, you know, on that. When you're on the witness stand, it's okay to use your notes. I mean, if I've got a document this high, for example, the attorney says, Wayne, what did you do on September the 2nd? Well, my God, I probably couldn't say what I was doing on September. I said, well, let me go back, let me look my notes. Oh yes, on September the 2nd, I did Ms. Bowman's class, and I visited her at 9:30 in the morning, and, you know, it's okay to check your notes, particularly when they're grilling you with things like that. It's okay to look. Also, it's okay to say, I don't know. You certainly don't want to make up an answer. You know, that's the worst thing you can do, is make up an answer. Then they'll find that you're wrong. I've always said, if you're going to take somebody to court and you're going to have a hearing, you go to that attorney, you have them to grill you with the questions that he thinks the defense attorneys will ask you, so that you can practice answering. We all know that there's sometimes answers better than others. You never tell the wife that that dress makes her look enormous. You might say that dress does not compliment your beauty as much as some of the others I've seen you wear. Yeah, and I will give you one example. I'll tell a personal story. And this was when I was first in administration, and I was assistant superintendent, and we were actually firing a principal. And he was African American, and of course the superintendent and I were Caucasian. And a couple of days back when he was, I don't know if Takesha remember this, being from South Carolina, at one time in South Carolina you could get an A certificate, a B certificate, a C certificate, you know, depending on what you made on the test, and he had a B certificate. And we had said, well, you know, if you could be a leader, you probably need to take this and try to get an A. We didn't mandate he get one, but we did say you need to take the practice test, what it was called in South Carolina, and see if you can get a certificate. And also, the first day of school, I went to middle school because I was a former middle school principal as well, and the superintendent said we have a concern. No one had been scheduled. They called the names out, and they went to different home rooms, and then they started scheduling that first day of school. So I mean, that was the type of thing. So we were recommending that
Chaos.
that we terminated. But anyhow, to make a long story short, they had what you call a deposition. A deposition is a pre-trial thing where they go bring in people and the attorneys go ask them questions. Because in other words, they're trying to get some background information on what you can say. They're trying to figure out whether you will be a good witness or is this one I can put pressure on and maybe get them to change the story, things of that sort. So the bottom line, they brought me up there and the attorney said, did you say that Mr. So-and-so is not smart enough to be a principal? Well, I knew what he was trying to say to me was, he was trying to say, you're requiring him to take a test and he hadn't been able to, so you consider him to be smart enough. I knew that if I said, oh yeah, he's smart to be a principal, then they'd say, well, why are you trying to fire him? So I felt I only had one answer to give, and so I said, no, he's not supposed to be a principal. It feels a lot better to say that. So when we had the hearing, and he had requested an open hearing, and there were 500 people out there, and most of them had a lot better tan than me because of the support of him. He was a member of county council or commissioners that we have here. So I mean, he was a well-liked person. He just was not a leader. And so anyhow, the first question the attorney asked me when I got up on the stage, he said, with the deposition, so did you say that Mr. So-and-so is not smart enough to be a principal? And of course you can hear the audience, ooh. Now that I'm wiser and older, there is a better answer. What I should have said at the time was, sir, I can't answer that question, but let me say he has not exhibited the skills that I believe are necessary to be an effective leader of schools. Now, isn't that a much better answer than, no, he's not smart enough?
I thought you were going to say, I don't remember.
So that's a good one if you're a president, you can say that, but not as a superintendent. Okay. Tell the truth. It's okay to admit you don't know something. I mean, it really is. God, the Lord said you don't make it up. And don't also say, I don't remember for everything, because then that's no way up either. And when I say go for the jugular, and the reason why is you against them. And if that teacher comes back in your school, you can't touch them. Because the minute you try to do something else, they're going to claim that you're trying to, what do you call it? Retaliate. Thank you. They're trying to retaliate. So you want to go for the jugular and win. Because let me tell you what, when you win and you go to another teacher and say something to them, you better believe they're going to get the message and they're going to listen, because they know that if you've taken one to court, you'll take another to court. And I don't mean that ugly. Where if you've lost, it may be, well, we don't have to worry, he doesn't know how to do things in. But what I would tell you in all sincerity, sometimes when you take somebody to court, even if you lose, you do gain respect, because at least you address the problem that people knew or existed. So you've got to weigh that as well. And as I said, win your first case, everybody loves the winner. Let me tell you what, when you're the principal and you're trying to fire one of the teachers, you walk into the teacher's lounge, and all that, nobody's your friend. You go sit down at the cafeteria table, everybody leaves. They don't want to be seeing you. But as soon as you win, everybody comes and pats you on the back and says, that Patrick should have been gone 4 years ago. But they'll never say that while the hearing's going on. All right, you can't appeal. We talked about that. It goes to the State Board of Education. And the State Board of Education, they don't have another trial. They just read the transcript and make a decision. They try not to get into whether Keisha's a good teacher or not, because each board and each school has their own standards for what is acceptable teaching and what's not. What they try to look at, did you follow the law? Like in Day, they felt like that they didn't follow the law because they didn't use the local, councils, school board councils. Okay. If there's other support of the decision of the local board, then the decision will stand, like I said, unless it's been abuse or illegal. If you've not followed the law, you didn't get the 10-day notice. And the role of the board is just to try the facts, and if there's conflicting evidence, must decide which version. Because you're going to have some people saying how wonderful teacher Joan is, you're going to have some others that are going to say how bad a teacher she is, and that board's got to sit there and weigh the evidence and then make the decision on whether or not to support the recommendation of the principal or support the teacher and feel like that she was not given enough assistance or was it bad enough to terminate. And that's what a board do. They're supposed to be impartial hearing. All right, Ashley versus Korstoffen. Anybody know who she is? Superintendent in Atlanta, at least until May.
Yeah.
We know that.
The one that just
Yeah.
resigned? or
Well,
she
hired?
non-renewed.
Right,
And I'll say this, and I don't let me on the camera too. I thought she was doing a pretty good job. And I've had a lot of interaction with teachers and things, and I thought she was doing a great job. But bottom line is, superintendent has to please the majority of the board. If they can't please the majority of the board, they can't get the contract. Okay. There was a fair dismissal hearing scheduled APS, and actually the teacher said, I'm just going to retire. I'm tired of this, I'm going to retire. Well, at that time, then they called off the hearing. Why do I need to fire him? He's retired. Well, after that, when they canceled the hearing, he said, well, I'm eligible to teach now. I can go back to teaching because y'all didn't have the hearing. I'm not fired. I changed my mind. So what do you think happened?
No.
Probably was eligible to teach.
Nope. They did rule in favor of the board there and said, when you retired,
Forced him to retire.
when you retired, they canceled the hearing, and therefore the trial wasn't necessary. They didn't need to go through that hearing. They got what they wanted on that. Now he could go and teach somewhere else, but not in Atlanta. All right. Let me tell you about another court case. Smith versus the DeKalb County Board of Ed. We're going to tell you about it somehow. Okay. Student committed suicide, allegedly told counselor of his plans. The counselor did not report the threat or take any action. Didn't consider it a serious threat. Counselor was terminated after the hearing. At no time did a charge letter or any communication regarding grounds for termination. Upon appeal, the state board overruled because there was no communication as to why that counselor is being terminated. So folks, you've got to do the charge letter, you've got to follow the law. If you just can't hope that you have a wonderful judge that's going to overlook some things and decide that it was in the best interest to make a decision. Contracts. All teachers and other certified personnel must have contracts, as in your Title 20 laws. Understand, if I'm a charter school system, and I've waited, I don't have to give you a contract. I can just say, hey Patrick, I'm a nice guy, you're a nice guy, we'll just agree to work. But most teachers aren't going to do that. They like something in writing. Administrators may have a contract up to 3 years. Now, I've heard teachers before say, well, that's not fair. I only get a 1-year contract. They get a 3-year contract. Well, here's the thing. Administrators don't have tenure or due process. And so, and not every administrator has a 3-year contract. I know as a superintendent, I wanted a 3-year contract because of several reasons. If I was going to spend money to move to a place, and I want to make sure I was going to be there a few years. Secondly, boards change about every other year or sometimes every year, depending on when the elections are. Most are 4-year terms, and you have 2 years. Like when I went to White County, I started August the 14th. In January, I had 2 new board members that didn't hire me. 2 out of the 5 were new. And then 2 years later, there were 2 more new. So in a period of me being in the school district 2.5 years, I only had 1 board member that hired me. So, sometimes people are not committed to you if they didn't hire you. And but the reason the administrator can have 3 years is because we don't have tenure, and they can just walk up to you at any time and say, like they did with Christopher, we're not going to renew your contract. I know you don't want to sound prejudiced. And what was the word you used one time? We were talking about when you're being partial to one another. What was the word you used? My mind's going blank. Bias, prejudice, whatever it is. Anyhow, I couldn't say, we don't want a female administrator, because then that, even though that was a reason, that's you're protected by federal law. There. By the way, some board members said that one time, and a superintendent won $400,000. But we'll maybe do that another time. The magic date is May 15th. That's when, by law, you have to have a contract issued to you. If one has not been issued by May 15th, then you automatically are renewed. So if I'm not going to renew Kakisha's contract, I have to tell her before May 15th, I have to give her a letter stating that her contract's not going to be renewed. Now, that's very easy to do if she's not tenured. If she's tenured, then I need to schedule a hearing and tell why. But all of that has to come before May the 15th. Now, can I fire her after the May 15th date? even if I issue another contract? Absolutely. She walked in class the next day and slapped somebody, or she gets arrested for robbing a bank, then, you know, the situation's changed, you know, I can do that too, right? Okay. Now, what used to be the day you got contracts? You might remember?
I know Gwinnett, it
Earlier.
was
Like
back in
March.
February.
It was April 15th, and a few years ago, some of the superintendents whined about it, saying, my gosh, we gotta issue contracts in April, legislators don't finish meeting until May, and we don't know what you've done to us. They didn't say it that way, but they just said, we don't know what the law, we don't know what the funding is, because, you know, several years, we got cuts. And here they were already obligated with teachers, you could still have a RIF, but I mean, it did make it a tough situation. And so that's why they moved to May 15th. Now, superintendents complain because May 15th, if a person, you know, the PSC allows them to, break their contracts if they leave by June 15th. And now they say, oh, it's too late. But my gosh, if you don't have to get your contract back to the 25th, that didn't leave but about, 15 or 20 days for a teacher to find another job. All right. Anyone whose contract is not renewed by May 15th, who has not resigned, has been non-renewed or terminated, shall be continued for the ensuing year. Between non-renewal and termination, terminations in the middle of the year, non-renewals end of the year. And I've always heard that if it's a bus driver, a paraprofessional that's not considered tenured, that you can at any time, if you fire them in the middle of the year, you still have to give them a hearing as well, because they have an expectation to employment. But I did have an attorney the other day say, no, you don't. You can't do that. I would just say you need to seek legal advice if you're trying to get rid of a non-certified. My personal feeling is that, that if you let them go in the middle of the year, it needs to be a good reason. It's not just on a whim. Well, both tenured and non-teachers may be non-renewed. Only tenured teachers are entitled to a hearing, while non-tenured are only entitled to explanation or reason. And a reason I can just tell Rebecca, your service is no longer needed. That's bottom line. If she wants to press, I can just say, I believe there are other teachers that can teach just as good as you out there. Why not want a mediocre teacher? I only want the best. Reduction in force, driven by economic conditions, and remember, Floyd County, I mean, I would say they went in economic trouble $10 million worth, right? Mm-hmm. The only consideration is to have written procedures to determine how RIP is determined. As long as you've got some type of policy, that's what guides you. And in White County, as we started getting these reductions, what I told principals, I said, principals, let me tell you what, a year or two from now, we know we're going to have to cut some because we only have X amount of fund balance, and we're going to have to make some cuts. My advice to you is you start being a little tougher on the evaluations, and you make sure that your marginal teachers are evaluated differently from your good teachers. I don't mean that ugly way, but in other words, you better, on the evaluation, you better make sure that Wayne is noted for being a good teacher and Mike might be noted as having some weaknesses. Because I said, bottom line, when we go do a RIP policy, is to start with those, just like Floyd did, those that had the lesser evaluations were the first ones to let go. But also what we did, we also gave a point system. Because we were called White County, I think for more than one reason. We didn't have a lot of minority teachers, so we gave points. If you were a minority teacher, you may have gotten 2 or 3 points. I didn't want to take a first-year teacher and lose because, so I gave them, because we needed desperately to keep our minority teachers. We also gave points for being a coach, or being the band director, or being the yearbook, because it's hard to replace those when you get those. Not everyone wants to do that if you're doing a good job. So that's how we went to a point system, and when we got ready, we were able to protect, just like we may have had a first-year coach. First year was doing a good job. We didn't want to lose him, so we were able to do that. We really wanted to get rid of the sorry ones. Okay, and most school systems use last one hired, first one fired, particularly in the larger districts. And my question to you is, which plan would you use to maximize keeping the best teachers? And that was my whole job. I think my job as superintendent is put the best teachers you can put in the classroom. And I've always told people, if there's a teacher out there that you don't want your child or grandchild to have, then nobody should have them. And I really sincerely mean that. It may be that I've got to work with Chris for a little while. Our teacher evaluations. They are considered confidential. If the AJC were to call me tomorrow and say, I want to see the evaluations of all your principals, I won't have to release that because the evaluations are confidential at this time. There are some states where they're not. I think Florida's one of them. All right, let's talk about teacher keys effectiveness system. Anybody ever heard of that? I'm assuming all of you have been evaluated on that, right? All right. It's in the law, 20-2-210. Might be all. Come on. All right, it was revised in 2016, and then Principal Adams always begins his back-to-school talk to his teachers with outlining his expectations for the TEKS evaluation process. He considers that the orientation and annual evaluation notification is required. Has he met the requirement by having a faculty meeting and talking about it? You say no.
Orientation part.
They have
maybe,
to check off the
Yes.
attendance, right?
They have to be provided training on it.
But this is this is before that. You have to have the notification.
I would-
Actually, by law, it has to be in writing. You can talk all you want, but you've got to give them something in writing. I mean, the handbook or whatever, but that is one thing that's supposed to be in writing. All right, let's go to another scenario. Ms. Connor, now I'm glad I didn't, I started to put in here, something like Mr. Allen or Mr. Young, to make it a little more
I'll be all right with
personal, but didn't want to hurt y'all's feelings.
Yeah.
Ms. Connor has been teaching for 10 years and is in the flexible process. Flexible process means what?
2 observations.
2 observations. Well, she calls the Georgia Department of Education complaining that Mr. Smart is picking on her because she has already had more than 2 observations. Is she breaking the law? No. I can evaluate you every day if necessary. That might be harassment if I'm going that often, but bottom line is just because you're in the flex process, principal has concern about you, they can visit several times a week. All right, here's another scenario. Mr. Smart observes Ms. Connor on August the 30th, 2019, which is a Friday. He shares her evaluation ratings with her on September the 13th, 2019. Did he meet the requirements of having a conference after the evaluation, after the observation?
It's close, it's 2 weeks.
10 days, business days. You take out the weekends,
Okay.
he met it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barely, but he met it.
Barely.
That came up today.
All right? Ms. Connors calls the Department of Education. She was evaluated on November the 13th. She was absent that day.
Wow.
Is that legal?
No.
Absolutely not. And believe me, that happens. I promise you it happens where principals will claim they evaluated somebody on such and such date, and the teacher said, I wasn't even there that day. Principal Smart gives level 1 and 2 ratings to Ms. Connor. She is really upset. Does she have any authority to get it corrected? No, because that evaluation is based solely on the principal's judgment and observation. And there's nothing you can do if they and I know right now that there are principals that do not do the TEKS with fidelity. I believe that evaluation is one of the most important things you ought to do. You ought to follow the law, you ought to be fair with people, and you ought to try to help them be successful.
Could she not ask why? Like if,
She could ask why, and he can just say, because you're not a good teacher.
oh, okay.
I mean, really, that's what someone would say, or I went to your classroom and none of the kids were paying attention. You ought to have kids raise their hand and asking questions and all that, but there's really, and here's the reason why. House Bill 244, the performance rating contained in personal evaluation conducted pursuant to Code Section 20-2-210, professional development plans and job performance shall not be subject to complaint under provisions of this part. That is by law that you cannot complain. The only thing you can complain about is if they didn't follow the law. For example, if they evaluated you on that, October 13th and you weren't there, or if they did not come to your classroom but one time, then you could come, but you can't complain about one or two. I don't like that law really because I know a lot of principals that, well, I shouldn't say that. look, I've been told there are principals that don't conduct evaluations with fidelity, and really, sometimes it's a gotcha because they don't like the person, and sometimes it's they cut corners and don't do what they should. So I have a question. Yeah, Mike.
Can the teacher, like, if they don't like one of the ratings that they get, can they write like a rebuttal or say that they don't disagree? And
Sure,
say,
they can,
"Keep that in"?
but what's
Doesn't matter.
the official
Okay.
evaluation? Yeah. You can write it, and you can refuse to sign off. And I just put a note in and say they refuse to sign off electronically. That's why she's getting a bad rating. She's uncooperative. She can't tell her anything. That's what I would say. You can't tell her anything. She's always right. All right, liquidated damages. There are some school districts, when you sign a contract, and a lot of them are giving them out in February and March now because they're trying to tie you to the contract, right? And what they'll do is that that if you break the contract, they've got in there where you're gonna have a $1,500 liquidated damages fee assessed to you. In other words, they take $1,500 out of your paycheck. You say, well, how can they do that? Well, remember, you get your June, July, and August paychecks for the previous year, so that, there's money in there to take it. But anyhow, Bettis versus DeKalb, they took it to court saying, we question the liquidated damages that they're getting. And they've got Georgia Association of Educators to represent the attorneys, and they resigned after signing the contract, and they challenged the liquidated damages fees, and the court actually ruled in favor of the teachers, and the reason why DeKalb could not give any reason how they came up with this magic number, whatever it was, I think it was $2,000 at the time. But it is legal for liquidated damages. But what I would do, I would put in there, well, it's going to cost me $500 to advertise and seek out. It's going to talk to my HR person $500 to interview and screen the applicants, and it's going to take the principal. No, what I would come up with legitimate reasons of why it's going to cost that much. I've got to train those new teachers if they're new to the district. I've got to train them that way. So it is legal, but you just got to have rhyme or reason. You just can't pick a number out there. In fact, there are a couple of cases in not cases, there's a couple of school districts in South Georgia. If you break the contract, it's $3,000. All right, let's go to the next one. Classified and other employees. You got to check local board policy to see how it's governed, but normally they're at will. In other words, you don't have any right to expectations. And I would also say if you have an intent to employ letter that I used to give out, then you have some type of expectation for that year. I still have some attorneys that tell me they don't. The reason we would send that out is to these non-certified employers, when they left in May, they'd file for unemployment. And who pays for unemployment? The school district has to pay a portion of that, so that's why you give a letter of intent. You can go and say they're not unemployed. I've given them a letter, they expect to be employed back when school starts back in August. But independent contractors, you have to look at the agreement you have and know how much to pay. Like most contractors charge 6% of whatever the cost of the building is. Attorneys have different ways that they charge, so you just need to look at that. And same thing with school psychologists. You just have to look at custodial services. All right, let me ask you this. Can a bus driver who has a son on the football team volunteer to drive teams to the away games? So think about it. I'm a bus driver. My son's playing football. If I drive the bus, I've got free transportation to the game. I'm not driving my car wear and tear. I also get in free because I'm driving the team in there. Can I do that?
Did it back in the day, I don't know about now.
Worry about the liability for everybody else.
I'm an
It's
employee.
covered in the
Right.
bus travel.
Yes,
I'm
I say
certified
yes.
bus
Don't
driver.
you have to be hired for that particular
No,
job?
because you're not getting paid, that's gonna be the problem, overtime.
There you go. That's exactly right. You cannot do that because if they're driving over 40 hours, then they are due they have to be paid for it. Here's another one. Oh,
Kind of silly though.
can a secretary eat at her desk during the 30-minute lunch break and continue to answer the phone?
No,
I
she wants.
think so.
That's her choice.
They do it all the time, don't
Kind of a
they?
problem.
But it is a problem because, again, they work X amount of hours. And in fact, in Alabama, what happened was two attorneys got together and went to several schools and talked with secretaries about this. and brought a lawsuit against some school districts. And you think about this, I mean, I've been, let's say I'm a secretary for 20 years. I'm not gonna say that. During lunchtime I answer, even after school, maybe I answer the phone and do some things because I've got a child that's practicing cheerleading and another's in the band. I gotta work to practice, so I'm gonna work to 5 o'clock. So I work from 8 to 5 every day, that's 9 hours. And then, you know, so it's 5 hours overtime, and I do that for 36 weeks. And so that's what, 30, and let's see, 180 hours? 180 hours, and then I do that for 20 years. And then when I get ready to resign, I'll file a suit and claim that the district owes me time and a half, plus all the interest I would have earned, and they would probably win.
No, it's funny, my brother works for the labor department, the federal labor department, and he's had cases like that where somebody's ready to retire, and they.
Absolutely. They're not gonna complain while they're doing it. You know, a lot of times we do them no favor, but we let them sit in an air-conditioned
Right.
place. But what you should, if you're the principal, you tell that secretary, you go and take your 30-minute lunch break in the cafeteria, the teacher's lounge, at 3 or 4, when you're supposed to get out. If you gotta wait, you go to the teacher's lounge, you go to the cafeteria, you go, so you cannot be in this office. Because even if they're, quote, your best friend, 20 years from now, they may like money as much as they're the best friend. So I'm just gonna tell you that happens. Demotions and transfers. A Board of Ed can transfer a teacher to a position without a hearing if it's not a demotion, okay? In other words, if Jonah's been teaching the Bluebirds in School A, we can actually transfer to School B and let her teach the Buzzards. And it may be that you're 4th grade one year, 1st grade the next year, and you hate teaching 1st grade, but
I'm quitting.
bottom line is, well, you can do that. But now, the only thing I can do, if I'm mad at Jonah, I can't do it for retaliation. And I would never say, Jonah, I'm mad at you. What I'd say is, Jonah, I believe your skills are better for 1st grade. Of course, Wayne's going to tell me how she said she hates 1st grade. So I'm going to do that. That's where you get it. But no, I mean, bottom line is you can. Now, let's think of another thing. Let's think that Chris is tired of teaching physics. He says, you know, I'm a physics instructor. I'm pretty darn good. It's time for me to be an administrator because I have all this knowledge. And, you know, so he goes and becomes a principal. And you know what? That physics brain just doesn't work in administration. It may work in academia, but it doesn't work in it. So the next year, I transfer Chris back to a teaching job, but I pay him the same salary that he's making right now as a principal. Is that legal?
I'd say yes.
It is. It is
It's not
legal.
considered a demotion then?
Not if you're paid
no,
the same.
right, because here's what a demotion is a demotion is considered, you gotta have a reduction in responsibility, which moving from principal to teacher
Right.
would be. It's gotta be a reduction in prestige, that as well. But I did not reduce his salary, it has to be
Has
all
all three.
three for it to be, you know, that. And let's talk about prestige a minute. Is it more prestigious to be at the high school, or is it more prestigious to be at the elementary school? Is it more prestigious to teach the Bluebirds or the Buzzards? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I really can't answer that. You know, but some people will tell you high school is more prestigious. Some people say, oh, elementary is a lot better. You don't have the headaches. It's much more prestigious here, you know. So, you know, you just, if you were going to court, you'd be on your responsibility to prove why it was a demotion. And you have to look at the totality. Failure to provide normal pay increments, downward adjustment of salary, cutting the work, you decrease benefits. You have to look at everything, but bottom line, if they're not messing your pay, they can put you about anywhere. And the employer has the burden of proof. You gotta look at shared versus open responsibility, number of students supervised. All right, number of employees managed, administrative duties. I would tell you that you know, there may be less students, but it may be more responsibility because they're younger kids and need more supervision. I mean, so you just got to be able to prove all of that. All right, now let's go to the next one. Supplemental contracts, most of the time, who are they given to?
Coaches, sponsors. Sponsors, coaches.
Yeah, coaches, right? Coaches, sponsors, could be band directors, course directors, drama teachers, those that do extras, some for yearbook. But if you're doing extras, some even if you're department chair, get a little bit of money. Not a lot, but supplemental contracts, you have to look at what does the contract say. Normally you don't have any property interest, though they're year to year. So in other words, if Patrick's coaching basketball and next year I decide I want to replace Patrick with basketball, I can take that and say, Patrick, you're no longer coaching, I'm not pleased with you, and that's legal because you have no expectation other than that year. Now, there are some contracts that tie in teacher and coach, so if you don't do one or the other, then you lose your job, but most are separate because you have a teacher contract and then you have a supplemental contract for being the coach. And by the way, Wright versus Newton in 1991, Wright was the basketball coach. They relieved him of his duties. He took him to court saying, you can't do that because I'm the basketball coach and I'm a teacher and I have a right and expectation of both, and the courts ruled no. Sick leave. Teachers can earn sick leave at 1.25 days per completed contract month. In addition, employers may be eligible for additional leave on the FMLA. FMLA entitles employees up to 12 weeks of leave annually for qualifying medical conditions or for birth or adoption of a child. If Patrick was adopting a child, could he take the 12 weeks off even though he's male?
Yes.
Absolutely. If his wife is a teacher, does she take 12 weeks off as well?
Yes.
I'm not so sure that both can. I don't know that. I'm pretty sure if they're both in the same school district, I believe only one of them can. But again, you need to know the law, you know that. That's what I don't know, but I'm pretty sure.
My husband and I adopted, and he could take off, and I took off.
Both of you both employed in the same schools?
Work at, well, not at the same school, but at Gwinnett.
Well, ain't gonna, well, okay, well, and of course, sometimes schools will allow you to do it, and you know, just as kind of a, I don't want to call it a perk, but because they're trying to be responsible employees too. I'm surprised. I'm gonna take my.
Because in my school, we just had a teacher, she just came back maternity leave. Her husband works there, he just left for maternity
Yeah, we
leave.
had one to do
So
that
they
too.
did it
was
back to back.
staggered,
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Okay, that clarifies it then, okay. And it doesn't have to be paid leave. Now, if you've got that much time built up in sick leave, you certainly get paid for it. But if you only have 10 days of sick leave and you take 12 weeks, you only get paid for two of the weeks. But you're guaranteed your job or one that's very similar.
Mine just happened to be during winter break, so it worked
Good
out.
plan.
3 weeks, I had 5 weeks.
All right, now, teacher constitutional law, First Amendment, you have freedom of speech. Teachers enjoy academic freedom, but not as much as college professors. I have more freedom than you do. And, you know, quite frankly, you probably have to cover the curriculum pretty much like it's laid out for you at the school, right? You can bring in some, but a professor, even though there's some guidelines, they can get off and talk on a tangent and not come after things. I can probably use a little more descriptive language than you can. So in fact, if you're a tenured professor, I swear it's hard to get rid of a tenured professor. It really is. In fact, a lot of colleges have gone to not even issuing tenure now. Piedmont doesn't have tenure. But teachers don't have as much freedom as a professor. And but you certainly have some freedom of speech. Common sense must apply. Some choice regarding film, books, the language may be deemed inappropriate. I guarantee you go show some R-rated or X-rated movie in your classroom, you could probably lose your job. I'm not so sure a professor would lose their job. They may speak to them and fuss at them, but it's more off the duck's back kind of. But as a public school employee, you don't have quite the same rights. And you've got to weigh your personal interest versus your public interest. I'll just give you an example. If Gwinnett were to have a SPLOS to build some new high schools or whatever they need, and Patrick wants to write a letter to the editor of the NAJC talking about why they should not support the SPLOS and why they should vote against it, and he's doing that as a citizen. He has every right to do that because that's freedom of speech. Now at the same time, if Wayne's a principal in the school district and Wayne writes a letter also against the SPLOS, he may lose his job because he might be considered administration and part of the team that is dealing with the SPLOS, and you would be insubordinate by not supporting the SPLOS. So it just depends on the situation. Like I said, the good attorneys will tell you it depends on the situation. And then of course you got to look at what the board policy says. Some freedom of speech, okay. Okay, Fourth Amendment, school equipment versus private equipment. You have a lot more control of your private equipment than school equipment. I guarantee you, if you've got a school-issued laptop, you've got somebody in technology that can go in and look at all your emails and all of that. Okay, and in fact, if you're going to be terminated, or if you're going through a divorce, probably one of the first things the attorney's gonna do is subpoena your computer records. Drug testing, right now, we don't really require the teachers, but we do require the bus drivers. We randomly drug test some students.
We do. My school randomly does teachers.
Yeah.
I've been drug tested, but.
Personally, I think it's okay, but then you can't make it that's what we talk with student rights, you can't mandatory everybody, it has to be random. And of course, I really questioned if Megan was pulled every month, or every 2 months.
One year I got pulled twice, I was like. Now I've been pulled in a few years, so.
And of course, the 14th Amendment, you're protected based on age, sex, race, or national origin. All right, now we're going to talk about a couple of court cases, Grigsby versus DeKalb. He'd been teaching in the school system for 8 years, the teacher's appellate. On Fridays in his course class, he played Pass the Mic. That's what he did every Friday.
Oh, Lord.
Students would choose a song and sing or dance to it.
Uh-oh.
On December the 11th of 2008, I believe, 3 male students chose Meeting in the Bedroom, which contains sexually explicit language. Not only that, guess where they got it from? His computer.
God.
Well, as the students sang, they began to engage in sexually explicit conduct. They improperly touched female students. They gyrated on female students. They performed lap
Oh my
dances.
gosh.
They removed their pants and shirt
Oh my God.
and simulated sex acts.
Right.
Typical chorus.
These events occurred while he was in the classroom.
Watching? Right.
Well, like any classroom modern day history, you had students with cell phones. And so what were they doing? They were videoing it. Well, lo and behold, the Christmas holidays, that video surfaced on the internet. And we have a lot of wonderful parents that surf the internet all the time. One of the parents saw that and sent it to board members. The board and administration investigated and scheduled a tribunal hearing. The tribunal vote was to terminate the teacher because of incompetency, insubordination, willful neglect of duty, immorality, and other good and sufficient causes.
And he appealed.
The board, remember the tribunal was the one that did it, and then the board affirmed that decision. He appealed to the State Board of Education, and he said that the school board failed to provide detailed documentation of his deficiencies and then never put him on a PDP. He's saying, hey, if I did that, you should have put me on a PDP and give me a chance to get better. What do you think the state board said?
I don't think that was remedial behavior, because that's what the PDP is for, is to show.
Absolutely, that is too egregious. You know, it's too late then. So he lost his appeal, and he said that they also allowed statements from students as evidence, but didn't require them to come. And remember, if you're a defendant, you need to have a right to question your accusers. But even with all of that, and he was not provided names of the board members in attendance when they had the tribunal hearing, but the State Board of Education upheld the decision to terminate him because they said, that's way too egregious, you don't need to be in the classroom.
Guess he can work at
Wow.
the Pink Pony.
Ma'am?
I said, I guess he can work at the Pink Pony.
Yeah, I guess so, well, you're right.
He'll just
All right, Horton versus Atlanta City Board of Education, 2009. She was a first grade teacher. The contract was not renewed on incompetency, willful neglect of duty, other good and sufficient cause. Near the end of the 2007-2008 school year, the principal found out a colleague of his needed a first grade teacher with experience in a new reading program the school system was implementing. Isn't that convenient? He found one of his fellow principals that needed somebody with experience, and he had just the person to do that. However, he worked out a transfer, but he did tell the principal, I think she can do real well in this situation, but you need to know she did have some problems with us. She had experienced difficulties and needed a new environment. The previous principal had noticed she had trouble controlling her class, And he had moved her from 3rd grade to 1st grade to kindergarten. Notice he'd given all kinds of chances, but he didn't pull the trigger. And folks, how many chances do you need to have? You know, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, you try. I can understand moving from 3rd grade maybe to kindergarten just to see, but I have to be unsuccessful there too. You know, but anyhow, so the new principal knew that she had a little bit of a problem, so he began noticing some of the same things. So he started off that year giving her critical evaluations. Then he told her in February that her contract would not be renewed. And folks, that's what should be done. It shouldn't be a surprise to teachers in May that they're not renewed. You ought to be telling that teacher in October, November, I don't know you're not happy. And certainly by January, February, the conversation ought to be, you know, unless you really step up and start really improving, there's no way I can recommend your employment to the school board into the next year. So, and so he told her in February it would not be. And the 3-member tribunal hearing, the termination recommendation was upheld, and the Board of Education upheld the recommendation of the tribunal, because again, the board is the one that hires and fires. Well, she appealed to the State Board of Education. She blamed the principal for not providing discipline to her students. Jonah, she said that's the reason she's having problems is the principal not worth the toot and wouldn't support her. She also stated that her former principal had done this in retaliation for a complaint she had filed against him with the PSC for mistreating one of her students. And the appellate students were observed running around, sleeping, and doing their own activities. People had seen that in her classroom. And so the termination was upheld by the State Board of Education. Okay? So I want you to know, we talked about tenure, and do teachers really have tenure? Look at your contract, look at what your school district has waived. If it's a charter school, you probably don't have, unless it's specifically written in there, that we award tenure. And I'm not going to go through Dave because that was already there in the PowerPoint, but Rebecca did a good job with that. And so what are we waiving? I mean, you know, depending on the contracts, tenure, hearing process for termination. How about, do we have to let teachers know about May 15th? How about anything else? I mean, you don't have any rights. How about class size?
Sorry, gone.
So you need to see what you're going, and how many can honestly raise and say they've read their contract?
I'm reading mine now.
If you better raise your hand, I would say liar, liar. You get that contract, it's there, you
Man, I got
look,
bills
sign
to
that baby and get it right back.
Yeah.
All right, so that's, I got that one. All right, let's do that. All right, teachers in the law, and let's talk about a couple of scenarios to see how you think the courts would rule, okay? Number one, a tenured art teacher in Mississippi criticized the district superintendent for canceling the art program at the historically black junior high school while retaining the program at a historically white junior high school. The superintendent justified the elimination, stating no art teacher could be located. The art teacher quickly located some candidates. The art teacher joined in public criticism of the superintendent. He wrote a letter to the editor, spoke out in public forums, and presented the superintendent a letter of no confidence. The superintendent arranged for a demotion of the teacher, and the teacher filed suit. Who did the rule for?
If a teacher could be confirmed as a demotion, then the teacher should probably be. But then couldn't they make a case that it was
I thought you weren't
retaliation?
allowed to weigh in on public.
Remember, this is Mississippi now, and not Georgia.
But as a I think it's protected speech.
You're correct. Particularly, this is a teacher. They have a little more rights as far as criticizing them. In particular, they'll tell you is as a superintendent or a principal, even some teachers, you are a public official, and you ought to expect some criticism. Okay? All right. Here's another one. A Tennessee junior high school teacher assigned a research paper to her 9th grade students. Students were required to select a topic subject to her prior approval. The subject matter requirement was only that it be interesting, researchable, and decent. Each student was required to use 4 sources. One student submitted an outline entitled The Life of Jesus Christ without obtaining prior approval. The teacher rejected the proposal, and the father protested to the school officials and filed suit.
I would think the teacher would win on that one if he asked for prior approval and the student didn't obtain it.
That's exactly right. Because if you give an assignment in specific, the students are supposed to follow that. If you don't give that assignment and just leave it open, then they'd have to accept it. All right. A French teacher was allegedly terminated because of the shortness of her skirts. The teacher sued, claiming freedom of choice in matters of personal appearance guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. Ladies?
What's short though?
And how,
Right.
do they have a policy? If there's a
Do they have
dress code
a-
policy
does
to
it have to
violate, then I
be-
think it'd be allowed.
I don't think you get.
Was there a continual issue?
Was our policy written down?
Right.
We have one written down, it's 4 inches, I think, above the knee.
Okay. If the school board should correctly conclude that a teacher's style of dress or plumage has an adverse effect on the educational process, it may terminate the employee.
Watch your plumage, ladies.
I know,
What'd you
watch
say,
your
watch your
lean,
what?
you got to do the lean test.
A Missouri school teacher, this school district fired a teacher with 17 years' experience after she failed to comply with specific recommendations to improve her performance, particularly her classroom management and student disciplinary methods. They indicated the problems in her evaluations and discussed them with her. The teacher complained that prior evaluation indicated she was competent, and the district created conditions for her dismissal by placing her in a class with a disproportionate number of boys and students with disabilities. In other words, they're setting her up for failure.
I think they got her.
Anybody else?
I think they
I
got
would
it.
agree, I don't see how she could.
Because they gave her
I
specific
think
I
I
think
think
still
they got
stick
it.
with her.
The court ruled in favor of the school system. Because basically, when you assign students, that's your responsibility to teach them.
Regardless who comes through the door.
All right, employment discrimination. Federal laws prohibit discrimination based on age, gender, race, religion, national origin, disability. All right, so we got those. All right, educator school liability. Most teachers are join professional organizations, so they are protected and have some type of, protection that represented by an attorney. But even the state does provide some liability insurance for all teachers, because I think that St. Purdue got mad at some of the teacher organizations and provided and made put it in part of the state budget. But torts, it's intentional, it's intent to do harm. In other words, it's like assault and battery. You intend to do harm to somebody. Negligence is unintended acts of injury caused by failure of the defendant to use ordinary care. And ordinary care, somebody really has to explain, and the court case that you did, Patrick, that ordinary care, they sure were very, how shall I say it?
Merciful, generous.
Yes, very generous with theirs. But there's several elements that must be present of a valid claim. You have to have a legal duty. Does she have a legal duty as a teacher to supervise kids?
Yeah.
Yes. Did she have a breach of that duty?
They decided no.
Exactly. They decided no. Paul Shaw would have said yes because should have been in the classroom, but she got around that by saying, well, I had one of the other teachers to check in on them while they're there. And was there a connection between her being out of class and the student getting injured?
Yes.
Absolutely. I would say that they probably would have had that horseplay had she been in the classroom. And then there's got to be an actual loss or damage in order for it to be successful tort liability. Okay? Now, duty of care, that's to act as a reasonable person. And I'm sure she could say to the people, well, I did act reasonably. I had to leave for a few minutes, and I asked one of my teachers, who is a wonderful teacher, to kind of keep an eye on my class. Standard of care must exercise care that a normal and prudent person would offer. It varies according to the age of students, mental capacity, the environment, and circumstances around the injury. So it depends. I think that a 5-year-old would certainly need more supervision at a field trip than a 12-year-old. 17-year-olds probably need more supervision
Exactly.
than a 12-year-old. So, again, it just depends on all of that.
Item.
And is there a connection between the teacher's conduct and the resultant injury? And was there an actual loss? Defenses, immunity. That was real big on that one there, is that she was a government employee and that so she has sovereign immunity. Contributory negligence. It wasn't just me. If Johnny hadn't been playing around with it and falling on him, it wouldn't have happened. So Johnny contributed to that. And the assumption of risk, the injured party knew of a possible danger. For example, if I wanted to go play football, and then I want to sue the coach because I broke my leg at a game, well, I knew that there was danger before I ever signed up for football. So that would be one. The supervision issues you really have at school is before and after school. There are some schools that say, don't bring a child before 7:30 or 7:45 because you can't at the high school because we got the doors locked. Well, if they're out there, are you still kind of liable? You better have something in writing that you don't assume any responsibility. Even that, I'm not so sure sometimes you can do, but you can say you've told parents not to drop them off till 7:45. You can tell them you could open up schools at 6 a.m. and you'd have somebody to bring them at 5:30.
Yep.
I'm convinced of that. All right, during school hours, you probably need to look at the cafeteria, gymnasium, shop classes, things of that sort, where most of it's done. Off-campus activities, and then potentially more dangerous classrooms, your labs, physical education, playground, those are the ones there. Johnson versus Wichita Parish Police in 1979, a 7-year-old child was killed while crossing the street. Court held the school district would not have a duty to provide school crossing guards. So they were not negligent, they were not required to do that. Now, in 1990, that's what, 11 years later, still in Louisiana, a 6-year-old child was killed attempting to cross the intersection. The school guard was absent from his post due to illness. And the courts ruled in favor of the parent because the school district had assumed responsibility for providing guards. In other words, parents had that assumption and expectation that someone would be helping Johnny across the street. And the day it wasn't done, the rest of the school was negligent on that. In Panama Buena Vista School District, California, school district opened at 7 a.m. but did not provide adult supervision until 7:45. A 15-year-old with a mental capacity of 3rd grader was tricked by another student with a history of discipline problems into the bathroom where he was sodomized and sexually assaulted. He suffered post-traumatic distress disorder and was awarded $2.5 million because they opened the doors at 7. If you open the doors at 7, you better be responsible for it. And then Daly versus Los Angeles, high school students engaged in slap fighting during recess, which resulted in the death of the student. And the school was negligent for not providing supervision. I don't know if I would think the slap fighting, I'm assuming that you start with the hands. I wouldn't think it's the face, but anyhow. All right, malpractice. Most rulings favor the school system. And there have been parents that have sued because their child didn't get a good education and said that it was just malpractice. But in Sane versus Cedar Rapids Community School in 2001 in Iowa, a guidance counselor incorrectly advised a student about an English course that would be accepted by NCAA. He was awarded a scholarship athletically. When he took that course, they found it didn't meet the NCAA guidelines. They took away the scholarship. The parents sued the guidance counselor for giving wrong advice and won. All right.